ideas of what the needs are. It just helps everybody to understand the whole process and when they argue or wonder why we do what we do, there's a reason behind it. So. Okay, let's go with the review process. So, so after all this, I mean, especially something that we're recording, something legal, something that we're buying, these sort of things, we want an extensive review process. We want to, for our map and our legal descriptions, it's very critical for these acquisitions and potentially to keep from having revisions or things turned back that's going to start a clock over again. And one of the biggest ones that I've seen in my own stuff and other things, it's common blunders. A lot of them, we call them Scribner errors, and they're just something that's worded wrong or something that spell check didn't catch because it's the correct word, but it's in the wrong context. So when you get these together, or your first one, or you're going along, QA, QC, peer review, all those things are just great to have. And kind of like we talked about before, is changes after things have been submitted and they're on the docket to go to the OTC, that becomes a formal revision and can delay things. So don't get in a hurry again. I know everybody's under pressure, but try not to rush it too much without getting a good review. So there's not any specific way. Every office is slightly different. Every group is different of how you work your QC QA process. The right-of-way designer, drafters, writers, reviewers, back in the day, I guess when things were centralized, Paul could tell more about that because he was there. They actually had certain people who they specified or worked on the drafting side of it. There were some who were the writers, and there were some who were the reviewers, and that's what they specialized in. Now a lot of us, we do all of it. And, like I said, when you stare at a document long enough by yourself, you can look right over obvious errors right in front of you. So it's good to have, that other set of eyes or two sets of eyes, to go over and ask questions, point things out. So, so review can be a light review or heavy. Some people are super good at grammatical errors. Some things just jump out at them as far as sentence structure maybe, or words, those sort of blunders. So to have a variety of people that look it over, I don't know that anyone is perfect. I know I'm not, as you found out earlier today. And so, reviewers should work with the designers, the right-of-way designers, drafter, writer, whoever's doing it. I know some of your groups, the surveyor just lays it out, someone else writes it, that sort of thing. Someone else drafts it maybe, but yet you're overseeing it, so your stamp's going on it. So again, don't get in a hurry, do your quality checks. So within ODOT, in our right-of-way manual, in appendix, there's 2 checklists that we have provided that they've created, put together over the years. I think original looks like in 2012. And there's a light review for maps. We've got some others that I think we've been working on for internal ODOT with some different stuff, but it basically has the same stuff too, from that the survey group is working on. I don't know if we're going to get them incorporated into the manual yet or when that's coming. It may be soon. So you can do the light review checklist. Goes through a lot of the things you don't have to get super detailed, but yet it is best if you, maybe the first one or two, especially if you're new at writing descriptions or your group is new at it. This is a great roadmap of things to check. You can get into the very detailed, which is going over the CAD and plotting and writing and everything all combined. So much more detailed, a lot more checklists, but it's tried and true. It's through, years of doing this basically. So this information was passed down and combined over the years. So like we've talked about, the primary purpose of the right-of-way drawing is to provide a visual guide and it assists in the property acquisition on our projects. And it has drafting standards that have been set up and clearly defined for years to make the information as clear and concise. And it's imperative that you try to adhere to the standards because that keeps that consistency that we were talking about. So in reviewing the right-of-way drawings, focus on the consistency, the clarity of the drafting, and grammatical elements, that have been placed. So in here, check for the proper line styles for the taking. So in this case, you can see there's a solid fee line that is used in the area that they're going to acquire, but also there's access control in front of it from the previous file. So the new access control line should be behind that, over the top of that, so it perpetuates that access control right. So in this scenario, look for graphics placed with incorrect symbology. So the easement line here for parcel 3 is not the correct line style. Look for labels of the easements. They must be part of the ODOT approved easement list and match the parcel title and the description. So this title here is not an ODOT standard easement. Now, if you were showing an existing, you would say an existing if that was the title of it, but not for a new easement. Here, government section lines don't stop at the highway, they continue through. So these are just some minor scenarios and things to look at. Remember our KISS principle. So here's a basis of bearing. Don't lose sight of its intended purpose. Basis of bearing is just to show its relationship to the alignment, to a government corner, to those ties. So, don't get too overwhelmed in the overall details and get it too cluttered to where you can't figure it out or someone else can't. KISS, keep it simple, surveyor. So also in this review, you want to look for things like missing data or mislabeled data. Here there's, a line sticking out. There's, graphics that extend where they shouldn't be past the high water mark, empty space. There's a parcel 2, but there's no parcel information, no square footage or any of that. Consistency, again, you can see that, everything else, all the files are supposed to have underneath a line. Parcel 9 doesn't, so there's an inconsistency. Inconsistent format. The feet doesn't have the square plus or minus. It's missing off of the end of those. Area shape parcel 3 is on the level of a permanent easement rather than temporary easement. See, it's a solid instead of the dash like over here. So look for those. So that just means that it's on the wrong level, or the wrong shape level for the pen table. Here you can see an area where the parcel area shape wasn't placed or wasn't made into a shape. So there's no color coming through. So Look for things like that. Look for clutter and overlapping text. You can see there's a lot of things crammed into there, and the distances are stuck over the line, so it's going to be really hard to read. So try to make sure everything lines up and fits where it needs to. A lot of times arrows can be used, like over here. You know, and just work with it to try to make it as clean as possible if you can. So some of these, there's a lot of stuff going into it. This one, you can see that they came down here and put what each of the parcels were and the titles down here because of the tightness of area. You can do that too. Yeah, clutter, overlapping. You can see here that the topo evidently wasn't labeled as exist, and so it's came through at full force and not gray shaded, and you can see how it overtakes all the other elements of the right-of-way map. Ownership text in file 5 over here is not the correct font. Ownership text for the file 6 is proper font. This one's a slant, this one's straight. Size even looks possibly a little bit out of whack. So, you know, look for those consistencies. Now we talked about some overlapping easements. Here's another scenario or showing of that. So we've got a permanent easement for slopes and utilities. And then we've got a temporary easement for road approach. The sidelines of that temporary road approach need to cross over parcel 2 over that slope and utility easement, because the slope and utility easement is only for slopes and utilities. It doesn't give us the right to cross that area to recreate or rebuild that driveway or road approach. So that's where it'd be so many square feet of parcel 3 lies within parcel 2. And then that way it's appraised correctly and we acquire the proper rights from the landowner. So we talked about the addendum. So it's the information sheet, metadata for the acquisition, and all this goes into RITs. It's for the document specialists, it's for agents, it's for all those to kind of know just the overall what's going on in one sheet, to make sure they have all the pertinent data for the file. And so make sure and go through, double check all that. I remember remainders talked about, we typically 100 acres or more is that way. Others, like you say, a lot of people in different regions, different ones, will use per the assessor's map or per the Polk County assessor's map or such, you know, which I think I'm going to talk about in a minute. Got ahead of myself. Throughways. Why we're still doing it, I'm not positive for putting that on there. But throughways were one of the first attempts at defining or labeling working with access. And it went up until 48, I think, or 51. I can't remember. Anyways, there's throughway maps that are created, and they're dated. They're a snapshot in time and history. And what they were is if there's not in an urban area where there was more businesses and more than like 10 driveways within a mile, it was considered urban or non-throughway. If you get into the open areas where there's less than 10 driveways per mile, it was considered through. They had it broke into sections, and there was only certain roads that were considered throughway. But what it had to do with was safety, access, and that sort of thing. Now we're still putting that on there, and it's still part of our addendum and still part of our process. Try as best as possible to define the area based on that old map. And one of the caveats with that is, or if any portion of the project hits within the throughway, then it's a throughway. If it hits, if it's all outside of the map of the throughway, then it's a non-throughway. So it's not a game changer or game ender, but if you have issues with it, contact someone and we kind of can go through it. It's not the most intuitive process anymore. And that changed over to where we have the newer access laws that allows us to acquire and control access. So access key phrase. So we pay special attention to this access key phrase, and there's 6 or 8 of them. And what that keys up is, it keys up what boilerplate for the document specialist to bring up that has the correct wording as far as controlled or restricted or uncontrolled or frontage roads or no access, all the different ones. And so we've had some issues over the recent years with this access key phrase and what's been put into there. And so that's why the right-of-way engineering surveyors aren't just doing plain telephone or sticking something in there. We're actually working with the right-of-way agents and the access control engineers and having them put that information and give it to us or put it into their side of the RITs so that there's no miscommunication, because it does cause issues. So, and whatever you do, if you don't know, don't put none. So if anything, leave it blank. So as far as if you're turning in something for a draft and you don't know yet, but you hopefully should know by the time you're writing the description or putting in the addendum. So anyways, if not, please contact your right-of-way agent, your project leader, whoever you're working for, and say, hey, I need to know what access rights or what key phrases or things are going on here so that I can get it correct on the map. I can write an access parcel if I need to, or that I can get it on this addendum review for when it goes in. So don't just throw anything on there. Make sure you're sure of what it is and get it directly from them, please. Be sure any overlapping easements, make sure that it's stated so that the appraiser can appraise it correctly. So this one, 160 square feet, more or less, of parcel 3 lies within parcel 2. So this is blanked out up here, just so you know. This was an older example prior to some of this, and so we didn't want to change all the slides and try to fix it up, so we just kind of blanked that out. So it's not, we're not hiding anything. It's just we don't want you to see that because that was an old way of doing things. So here I put in some just put in a remainder and not really say where they calculated that from. But because of the issues with appraisers, I wouldn't say issues, I should say, because we have so many different appraisers and variety of appraisers in the way that they do things, I think it's best for us to state where we derived that remainder from. And per the assessor's map is the easiest or the least refuted, only because that's what they use typically for their determinations when they look at it, as the assessor's maps. And again, I will say though, assessor's maps are not perfect like everything else. If you see that there is a huge discrepancy, you can check with the assessor to see, or you can say, per the deed calls, per area calculations in microstation, whatever, this is what the remainder is. And when I have done that before. I put remainder per assessor's map, but believe it may be an error, and then I put what I calculated or what the deed call has. And I just put them both. Then if the appraiser has an issue, they can contact, or they can ask the appraiser or the assessor or someone else too. So so it's okay to put both, but try to put where you obtain that remainder area from. So okay. Prior files. So the reason for prior files, like I talked about, with our projects that are stacked on top of each other, and say we've had 2 or 3 different acquisitions over the years, and in one of them we acquired some access rights, or we gave a reservation, or there was some other specific thing in there that is a right that we acquired or we left with the property, then we need to know what that is. And so we used to spell it out just like this. We would type and add all of this in here for the agents or for the doc specialist to know, and a lot of the title reviewers too to know. You can type all that in, or you can just list the information, and then in the new format, we're calling that access impact notes. The right-of-way agents are putting on their side, along with communication with the access engineers. They're saying, what are the access impact notes? And they'll say, you know, prior file, or this property has access controlled with a reservation at this point, and no change is going to be made. The reason for doing this is because they found that the access rights from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, some of those things aren't getting propagated or moved forward within the new acquisitions, and the new properties are appraised and different things. So they're wanting them to be brought forward and included in the new files that we acquire. That way it doesn't get lost and people don't have to search back so far in different things. So so if nothing's changing but they have access control, that'll be mentioned, and then it'll be perpetuated or brought forward, even though if no change was going to be made. So that's why we do that. So the access control note is what's the new style that is being brought in as of August of 2019. And this was right-of-way headquarters, and they have a directive out in a booklet or a training or a chart that they went around and worked with all the agents and right-of-way engineers and everything and talked about it. So, and so here's, you know, all the information that's put in there about what was there, what was said in the description, what's going to happen, and whether it's going to change or not change. So.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Question. What is the reason for the remainder? Is it included on the recorded deed?
No, it is not it's not on the recorded deed. A lot of people said they wish it would just go away because it's a pain. It started years ago, but I think it was started kind of as a was it planners and I think it really honestly had to do with whether we were leaving with an uneconomic remainder of property for smaller properties, or maybe it had to affect with the way appraisals were done in the past. I'm not sure. I know that it has played into newer ones with, you know, with the planning commissions or planning zones and lot sizes and all that sort of thing. So
is that a liability to the surveyor?
No, but you will get appraisers who will argue with you over the rounding of 100th of an acre. So um, most most assessors maps are in acreage. We try to keep everything in square footage except for large acquisitions. And we actually I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but got in a discussion with headquarters about a file that had a 1.12 acre fee parcel, and it was listed in acres. And then it had a 900 and some square foot temporary easement. And the appraiser decided to use acreage calculations for both and potentially changed the value of the appraisal by $75 less than if he would have changed and went to a square footage calculation. And should we mix and should we match in the same description? We change it to square foot and we round up or round down. We change it to acreage, you round up or round down. How they want to calculate it and which one would be the higher or the greater value. And so that's up for debate. And I said in our manual, anything over an acre, we typically only show as acreage in acres. Anything less than we do in square footage on our descriptions. How they appraise it, I can't really justify how they appraise it and which would be the better, and is mixing it, is it wrong? I don't know. So Right Away is going to get back to me on that. So we'll have to see. Yeah.
Great.
A lot of times, Mike, I was going to add that it's good to put as specific as you can on that remainder acreage where you got it from, and then that kind of helps the appraiser know. And I think we always put it on there. It kind of helps the appraiser kind of get a percentage of how the land is affected.
Right, and I think that's what I was trying to come across, Paul. You're correct. So it has to do also with the damages or the impact to the parcel, and that's part of that remainder part, I think. But that's why I'm saying the safest bet is to go with the assessor's map if it's accurate or close enough, because the appraisers typically won't argue with the assessor's map, but they will argue with you. So, yeah.
Great. So we do have a couple of questions, but do you want me to save those till the next slide?
No, go for it.
Great. So are all of ODOT's access rights permanent, or are there term limits on them that need to be reviewed or renewed?
I have never seen a temporary or termed access right. No.
Okay.
And one way to look at this, in which it's hard to twist your head around for a while, but when we say we're buying an access right and it says it's restricted to such and such a highway and the grantor's remaining real property, what it is it's a right that we're actually leaving the property with. So we're saying when we buy this right, we're saying the grantor who sold this to us, your property, whatever that is that's in that deed, has a controlled right, only has a controlled right to get on there. So we're restricting that. So it's what the property is being left with, what access right is being left with when we acquire the property. So, and we can grant them accesses. They call them an indenture of access, which is either moving one or granting one. Then they still have to go through a permitting process with district to say, yes, they can build a driveway or an approach. And then they also have to build it to a certain standard. So, it drains or it's wide enough or safe enough or those sort of things. So hopefully that answered that.
Great. And the last one we have here is, What is the expected accuracy of remainder calculations using assessor's map info and other unsurveyed calculations?
Same scenario. If the assessor's map is to the 100th of an acre, as close as you can to that, try to stay within it. But it gets kind of hard when you're only maybe taking a couple hundred square feet. Is it going to change the remainder calculation to 1,000th of an acre? Maybe not. I don't know.
And the other thing is about all our descriptions, whenever we mention any kind of thing about area or acreage, we always say plus or minus. So
Right.
because a lot of the times our maps are just caricatures. We don't survey the properties. We survey our property.
Correct. And that's kind of like the discussion I see, precision versus accuracy. So we're not surveying all of these properties and their sidelines and everything else. We're laying them out per deeds. We're using record of surveys. We're doing our best attempt without actually surveying every single property, because ORS gives us the right to do that. If we're taking off strips, we're not doing a replat or a partition plat or any of those things. So we have a plus or minus. Sometimes right away or appraisers don't like that, and they'll still argue that, from a surveyor standpoint, I argue with, when I go out and survey something and there's a monument someone set 20 years ago, and I shoot it and I say, well, it should be actually 1/10 this way or that way, and so I put a new rod in because I say I'm better than them. No, that's not the way things work. It's a plus or minus. It's situational. So you fit it within reason, and that's kind of how we work that. We try to give the benefit of the doubt to the property owner in all circumstances, and we stay as close but not exact in that sense, because we didn't do it that way. So anyways, hopefully that answered the question.
I think so. And I think that's all of them for now. So you may proceed.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so variable width table. They're written to describe a variable width. Now the one below was more like a described line, and it's not correct. Okay, so it's important to understand the purpose of a variable width table, as it defines the width of a taking, by bounded stations. So by this, they're saying it's between stations, and then they do the straight line on the sidelines and all that sort of thing. So when we're doing a center line description, bounding that way or adding too many things to it doesn't work. That's not the way to do it. So the proper way to do it is within the variable width table. It's a strip of land, and when it says 43, you don't have to do the call at the right of way line, because remember, we're going from here straight out, just like a 90-degree angle, okay, at that station, and we're doing 43 feet from here to here, total strip from center line out. So we don't have to, we're not describing the whole line, we're describing the strip, okay? And then from that point, same point, you see, same stationing. Now we go to 39 feet, and we do 39 feet all the way to the end. So it's a strip from the center line clear out. It's not describing this line, it's describing this whole strip and the jogs in that strip. So those are things to look for in the review process also. Now we do described lines, and we do described tracks. One common mistake something that can happen in a strip description, you can't go backwards on line. It has to, everything moves forward. If you have a jog or something that has to go backwards, then you need to do a described line or a described tract. So throw that out there. Things to look for. This one, what do we got? Oh, okay, so these are just terminologies, the way things that are written, being a portion of that deed to Jess and Irene Walker, a portion of that property described in that indenture deed. So specify the type or the total or the title of the document, and it's only a portion of that property that's described in that indenture deed, and then the recording and all that stuff there. So in the manual, you'll see lots of examples. It's very specific, and if you look back to a lot of documents that can be up to 100 years old of ours, it's basically done the same way. Look for Scribner's errors in the center line and others. So here we got southeast one, but if you look at the map, this way you have to have all of it together. You see that it's actually northeast and not southeast. So that's why you want to get this center line. If you're writing a whole bunch of descriptions, this same center line description could go in 20, 50, who knows how many descriptions, and you're just going to copy and copy. And so if you have an error in it, actually I found one in a project when I was doing, as I was writing a relinquishment. The project had closed, writing the relinquishment. I followed or just copied the centerline description, and actually Right of Way caught it. And it was this exact same thing. It went northeast instead of northwest. And I think there's 3 descriptions that were written, recorded, acquired, and everything else. And now we have to go and get official copies and revise them. Fortunately, my relinquishment was just still in review or hadn't been totally finalized. But it can happen. And what it was is the surveyor just copied that centerline description in 2 different ones or 3 different ones. And so there it did. It got acquired and purchased, and it was headed the wrong way. So it can happen. So please review your stuff, have it peer review. We do not use right or left anymore. I used to, but now we use cardinal directions. So in the table, we want to specify what side of the center line when we're doing it. They copied a table probably from, another description, did some edits, forgot to change something. So we don't use right or left. We use the cardinal calls, that sort of thing. So not only in this case is it the wrong terminology using right, but the direction also incorrect, stating west instead of east. So square footage, no decimals, bad decimals. Round to the nearest foot and round up if at all possible. So this one would probably be down just because it's really pretty low. So it would stay at 981. If it was 4, pushing 5, maybe you might could round up to 82, but no decimals. Even if it's a tiny little sucker, no decimals. Because appraisers only go to square footage. They don't do break it down that far. So the accuracy is just, we haven't surveyed it to the 1,000th of a square foot. I mean, that's just, gotta, we're not building a watch, and yeah, don't do it. So parcel 3 temporary work area. Wrong title for the easement. It's a temporary easement for a road approach, not a work area. So look at those. They accepted there from parcel 2. Parcel 3 should extend over the top of the other, and so many square foot, 234 for this, should be inside of parcel 2. Okay. So this one is, let me go back here. Whoop, whoop, get back here, overlay. So this one you can see is kind of on a corner. There's a center line tying in this way, center line going this way. They've got it broken into 2 separate parcels, one that's on the sideline, one that's on the main line, okay? Just so you got a good visual there. So there was the description. And so it had a stationing to a stationing, 90 in a straight line to 7650. Watch this stationing here. So here's that stationing, plus 8356 at 7650. You see anything wrong with this little knob sticking out there? So when you do a 90 degree to the center line, they didn't double check that this went past the end of that. So in this description, we didn't acquire that triangle, okay? So those are things to keep an eye on with strip descriptions. So what they should have done, or the simple solution would have been to carry that false call clear out to this station over here, then we know that it crossed that property. And remember, this sideline, though we didn't survey it, though we didn't define it that way, it is defined by the deed that we are acquiring the property from, okay? It can't go past it. So in other words, we couldn't be acquiring from this person if it was a person, it's a road, but because those 2 deed lines. So yeah, make a call past the property. So up in the top here, it says that it's lying on the easterly side of the center line of the relocated Market Road. Okay. Which side is the easterly side? Over here. We didn't mention, or the description writer didn't mention, any property that lied on the westerly side of that. So in this description now, we didn't acquire any of that property or that property that we intended to. So make sure and check those sort of things so that in those that we make sure that we acquire on both sides. This center line one happened quite a bit. So really watch for that one. So here's the 2 tax lot scenario. They're continuous with each other and are described in the same deed to the grantor. They could be combined as 1 fee parcel. However, circumstances such as continuity of use, like I talked, one is if one tax lot is residential, agriculture, and the other is commercial, then the agent may want you to split them into 2 different parcels, or they may want you to split them into 2 different files. It depends on what they feel is the best way to appraise and take care of the property owner. So these 2 tax lots are also contiguous. They have the same owner. They could be combined into one and the same deed. However, their use, again, so, you know, fee and fee, and what is their use, okay? So another one that's, make sure in the manual, you always want to make sure a reference to a subdivision is the exact name that is on the plat of that subdivision. It's always put in capitals, so that it's official, that the way that it was platted so that it can be matched up exactly, so you know exactly what we're acquiring from or where. Don't avoid abbreviations, especially in subdivision names, unless the abbreviation is part of the name. Okay. Now they can be abbreviated on the map, on the right-of-way map, but not in the Exhibit A. How am I doing on time? I'm good. Oh, wow, I'm still ahead. Okay. All right. In your augmenting and clauses, you want to make sure, double check that. Except therefore property described parcel 1 and parcel 4 warranty deed to Malheur County, Parcels 1 and 4 are designators of the description of 2 parcels. So the proper method would be designated. So that property designated as parcel 1 and parcel 4 in that warranty deed. It is described, but it's more that it's designated. That's what it is. So little words like that. Yeah, they're designators. So except they're from, okay, so if they're putting the grantor's name in, like in this case, state of Oregon could be ambiguous. There's many agencies within the state of Oregon. So it could have been forestry, parks, recreation, fish, wildlife, state lands, except, you know. However, though, just, you know, there were some early ones back in the early 20s or 30s. I have seen them where it just says to the state of Oregon. But you also look at some of the earlier ones, it was to the state of Oregon Transportation Commission or Oregon Division of Highways. So it's just more designators that help clarify what it is that we're talking about, even though we know it's a warranty deed, we know it's recording, but we should have the correct title, just like we should have the correct grantor when we write their names in. And here's a double clause. When using qualifying augmenting clause, except, also, and also, etc., put them all in caps so that it really stands out, so it can't get missed. So that way that those qualifying and augmenting clauses are well known. And another one that gets missed a lot of times, especially when you're copy and pasting, or you just get in a mode, you're doing multiple files that have lots of parcels. If you have a single parcel in a file, there is no parcel 1 because it is the only one. If you put parcel 1, it could almost imply that there should be a parcel 2. So don't put a parcel 1 or anything. It should just be fee. Okay, and that limits it just specifically to say that that's the only thing there is fee. When we put, like, say, it could, people look for, it's kind of like they say, where's page 2? You see the northeast quarter and the northeast quarter. So standard for referencing the adequate parts of a section to abbreviate them such as northeast quarter. When you reference them, you know, we write it out as a whole. So stacking or splitting them apart or otherwise it's not acceptable and should be avoided. This is all inside of the right-of-way manual, and which Paul in his next session is going to come up with, and he'll be working on actually writing descriptions and showing kind of stuff in the manual and where to find it, what it looks like. So in the review process here, these are just kind of common things to look for. So we have an except since we had a prior acquisition right-of-way phase outside the existing right-of-way is not necessary. Because the road itself is held under other title, there's no portion of the grantor's property within the right-of-way. So when it says outside of the right-of-way, existing right-of-way, that that comes in the old stuff where it was resoluted road or whatever is there by easement, and this old deed of these grantors, usually you'll find it more out in the rural areas now, where their legal description went, say, to the section line, which is the center of the road. And so they've never changed that deed, nothing for years. So then when we come through and buy an acquisition, we state how much is outside of the existing road, and then the others how much is inside it, because it will be appraised at different values. And the reason why is because the grantor hasn't had the use of that other than as a road. They gave that to it. So that's the outside of the existing road. But if we have acquired it in fee and we have color of title, then it's our property. You don't have to say it's outside. It is. So, and that's down here in this except, where they put in this other part.
Hey, Mike,
Okay.
can the entire
Yes.
document be in all caps instead of upper and lowercase?
Which one? I didn't
Can the
hear first part.
entire document be, oh, I'm sorry, you're asking which document?
Yeah. No. So if the entire document was in caps, then you couldn't make augmenting clauses and titles and those things you want to stand out. So we want to go with standard, capital, lowercase, all that through the normal document. Things capitalized that are supposed to be capitalized. And then when we have augmenting clauses and the other, then when you do capitalize them, they do stand out. So did that answer that, hopefully?
Yep, we're all good. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Because I'm cruising along here. It's been a little while since I put these on, and then of course in this format, a lot of times when you're in a classroom format, you get a few more questions and a few more delays. It kind of staggers you along. So, and probably I'm getting hoarse, so I'm glad that Paul's going to start talking now and give my voice a break before I crack. How about we're coming up. Should we do an early break then?